Smoke hangs low over a rain-soaked airfield in southern England, the pre-dawn darkness broken only by the thrum of distant engines and the glow of floodlights shimmering on puddles. Mechanics in oil-stained uniforms move like silhouettes through the mist, checking instruments, tightening bolts, whispering to each other as if afraid that sound alone might draw enemy bombers from the clouds overhead. The world is at war, and every tool, every wire, every screw carries a weight far heavier than metal. What you're seeing isn't just preparation for battle. It is the birthplace of technologies that will one day guide aircraft across oceans, detect storms before they form, and quietly map every inch of the planet. And then, in a cramped brick building just beyond the runway, another kind of battle unfolds. Inside, the air vibrates with the hum of experimental machinery. A pair of young physicists hunch over a makeshift workbench, eyes fixed on a strange metallic tube no longer than your forearm. They trade glances, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Nights bleed into mornings here, and the lamps burn as long as the threat of invasion looms. One of them flips a switch. A needle jumps. A faint pulse dances across the screen. In that moment, without fanfare or celebration, the cavity magnetron, a device built to unleash bursts of concentrated microwave energy, sparks to life. No one in this dimly lit room knows it yet, but this strange little tube will eventually sit behind the silent hum of your kitchen microwave, heating leftovers in seconds. Outside, the war rages, but in laboratories like this, a different kind of pressure builds. The urgency is absolute. Scientists, engineers, and mathematicians find themselves thrust into roles they never imagined, not as academics or theorists, but as soldiers of innovation. The stakes twist their nerves into steel. Every breakthrough might mean the difference between a city spared or a fleet destroyed. Every failure might cost thousands of lives. Step into another facility deep underground, where the air tastes faintly of dust and metal. Rows of women in headsets lean over spinning dials and incoming radio chatter. Officers stride down narrow aisles, their boots clicking sharply as they deliver coded fragments to a secret room tucked away behind reinforced doors. Inside that room stands an immense machine, hissing, clattering, its wires warm to the touch. Lights flicker across its face like fireflies trapped in glass. Operators feed punched paper tapes through it, the loops unspooling like a river of secrets. This is the early pulse of computing, a prototype that blends human brilliance with copper coils and vacuum tubes. It's crude, temperamental, absurdly loud. But it works, and in working, it becomes the distant ancestor of every modern computer, every smartphone, every processor that runs silently in your pocket. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the sense that the world is collapsing on one side while being rebuilt on the other. Wartime desperation strips away hesitation, bureaucracy, doubt. When a bomber appears on the horizon, when convoys vanish beneath the waves, when coded messages slip across enemy lines, there's no time for theories. Solutions must be immediate, tangible, real. And so, the impossible begins to feel merely difficult. The difficult becomes mandatory, and the mandatory becomes routine. Engineers stumble out of workshops with soot on their faces, clutching blueprints like treasure. Mathematicians scribble equations across chalkboards until their fingers cramp. Chemists race to synthesize substitutes for materials suddenly cut off by blockades. Rubber, nylon, plastics. These efforts seem mundane in the moment. A new fiber to make parachutes, a new polymer to insulate wires, a new adhesive that holds under pressure. But those materials will one day weave themselves into clothing, medical devices, household tools, so ordinary in your life that you'll never suspect they were born of a global emergency. Walk through a factory floor in Detroit, where machines once meant for cars now roar with the rhythm of wartime production. Sparks fly as assembly lines churn out engines, components, experimental parts. Men and women of every background stand shoulder to shoulder, their faces illuminated by the orange flare of welding torches. Innovation doesn't come from a single genius in isolation. It erupts from thousands of hands, thousands of minds, all working at a speed and scale the world has never seen before. In moments like these, when the world trembles under the shadow of conflict, something unexpected happens. Imagination accelerates. Fear sharpens focus. Hope becomes a form of defiance. And technologies not yet dreamed of suddenly tear through the fabric of possibility, emerging into the world half-formed, brilliant, and hungry for a future they can't yet see. So when you hold your phone, when you hear the soft chime of GPS recalculating your route, when the microwave door clicks shut with that familiar metallic snap, you are hearing echoes. Echoes of this rain-soaked airfield. Echoes of these exhausted engineers. Echoes of a world that had no choice but to invent its way out of darkness. Fog settles like a heavy curtain over the grounds of Bletchley Park, softening the edges of the old manor house and muffling the hurried footsteps of the people streaming in and out of its doors. Inside, the air crackles with tension, not the kind born from gunfire or explosions, but from the relentless pressure of time. Every coded German message that slips through these walls is a puzzle with a fuse attached. Every delay, every wrong guess might mean ships sunk, bombers lost, cities burned. And so the work continues around the clock, lit by hanging lamps and driven by a desperate need to make sense of the enemy's encrypted heartbeat. Step through one of the narrow hallways and into Hut 11, where the temperature always seems a few degrees higher than everywhere else. It comes from the machine, towering motorized, electromechanical, filling the room with a mechanical growl that vibrates in your ribs. The operators call it the bomb. Its drums spin in a blur of synchronized motion, its relays clicking in sharp bursts, as if the machine itself is counting down the seconds left to win the war. But just beyond this is something stranger, quieter, and infinitely more revolutionary. In a sealed-off room where access is tightly controlled, engineers and mathematicians gather around the first of its kind, an electronic, programmable computing machine built not from gears and rotors, but from valves, wires, and glowing vacuum tubes. It hums softly like a sleeping giant. Flickering lights pulse across its panels. Warm air wafts from the banks of circuitry. This is Colossus, the world's first large-scale electronic computer, a machine so impossibly advanced for its time that, even years after the war, the public won't believe it existed. Here, the birth of modern computing doesn't unfold with fanfare. It unfolds through the rustle of paper tapes, the smell of solder, the chalk dust coating every surface. Men and women lean in toward the circuitry with the careful patience of surgeons, adjusting voltages, testing logic paths, coaxing the machine in a speed no human mind could match. Every improvement, every refinement, brings them a step closer to deciphering the enemy's most complex coded messages. In this dimly lit room, the digital age isn't an idea, it's a necessity. Far to the west, across the Atlantic, another team works in similar secrecy. The laboratory hums with electricity, both literal and emotional. Engineers gather around what they call the ENIAC, a massive electronic calculator occupying an entire room and devouring power like a small village. Cables snake across the floor in bundles as thick as a man's wrist. Panels tower overhead like the walls of a metal temple. When switched on, the machine fills the air with heat, noise, and a faint odor of ozone. Lights chase one another across its modules in shimmering rows. Every sequence, every flash, every pattern represents a calculation once considered beyond human reach. The operators move among the panels like dancers, plugging and unplugging cables, flipping switches, interpreting the language of glowing bulbs. Here, mathematics becomes motion. Code becomes choreography. And as the machine roars to life, something monumental unfolds. Humanity's first steps into a world where information can be transformed, transmitted, and manipulated at the speed of electrons. For the first time, complex ballistic trajectories can be computed in a fraction of the time. Weather predictions sharpen. Cryptographic challenges shrink from insurmountable to merely difficult. And behind the scenes, a new kind of thinking begins to take shape, one that sees problems not as static obstacles, but as patterns to be decoded, optimized, and solved by machines built to think in abstract sequences. Meanwhile, radar technology takes on a new form as well. High above the choppy waters of the North Sea, an aircrew peers into the soft green glow of a cathode ray display. A blip appears, then another. Waves distort and swirl across the screen. The crew's eyes widen, not in fear, but in recognition. They're watching the invisible world made visible. Radar no longer simply warns of approaching aircraft. It begins to map coastlines, storms, and moving objects with a detail that seems nothing short of supernatural. The signals, once ghostly and unclear, become crisp enough to guide ships, track weather fronts, and chart the very edges of the world. What began as a tool of survival evolves into a foundation for navigation, aviation, meteorology, and ultimately the systems that will lead humanity into orbit and beyond. It's easy, standing in the glow of your own screen today, to take these digital miracles for granted. The warmth in your hand when your phone wakes. The invisible threads of data connecting you to people across oceans. The satellites overhead triangulating your position with pinpoint accuracy. But if you listen closely to the soft electronic hiss, the quiet clicks, the faint hum of cooling circuits, you can almost hear their ancestors. Colossus breathing steam into a cramped wartime hut. ENIAC exhaling heat into a dim laboratory. Radar consoles whispering through static in the belly of a bomber. The digital world didn't arrive fully formed. It was built in the shadows of conflict, under the pressure of deadlines that could not slip, shaped by minds racing against disaster. And in that crucible, humanity discovered something extraordinary. That information itself could be weaponized, analyzed, predicted, and eventually liberated for peaceful use. The dawn of the digital age wasn't a sunrise. It was a spark in the darkness. The factory floor glows with the orange flicker of molten metal, the scent of hot steel and machine oil thick in the air. Wartime production transforms the space into a restless beast. Conveyor belts glide like veins. Workers swarm like cells feeding a living organism. Sparks fly from welding torches, casting bright halos around the faces of men and women who work in rhythmic, unbroken motion. They do not think of the future. They think of the next hour, the next shipment, the next deadline. Yet here, in this industrial symphony of urgency, the technologies that will one day slip seamlessly into your home begin their quiet journey into existence. Follow a technician deeper into the facility, past the deafening clatter of engine parts and the pounding of hydraulic presses, until he stops at a small, cluttered workbench. In front of him sits the boxy metal frame, no larger than a suitcase, covered in knobs, wires, and a strange humming tube. The technician wipes his brow, adjusts a dial, and watches a tiny spark flicker inside the cavity magnetron. This device, originally designed to produce high-frequency microwaves for radar systems, has been pushed to its limits by the brutal demands of aerial warfare. It must detect enemy bombers through storm clouds and darkness. It must see the unseen. One day, during a routine test, a stray chocolate bar melts in an engineer's pocket as he stands near the machine. A trivial accident, the kind of moment no one records in official reports. But in this molten smudge lies the seed of something extraordinary. The realization that this wartime microwave technology can excite water molecules, generate heat, and cook food faster than any stove ever could. The battlefield, without intending to, has just introduced the future kitchen. Half a world away, another revolution begins with a different kind of roar. On a damp airfield in 1944, a prototype aircraft revs its engine. But this sound is unlike the familiar thrum of propellers. It's a smooth, rising howl, a sound that feels as if the future itself has taken a deep breath. The jet engine comes alive. Flames burst from the rear exhaust in shimmering ribbons, and the plane leaps forward with breathtaking acceleration. Ground crews shield their faces from the hot blast, their hair whipping back. They know they are witnessing something unprecedented. The jet engine is not just a weapon of speed. It is the ancestor of all modern air travel. The smooth power of turbine blades slicing through air will eventually carry civilians across oceans in hours instead of days, shrink the planet into something navigable, and usher in the age of international travel. Every takeoff you've ever experienced, that rising thrust that presses you into your seat, is an echo of those early wartime tests. Synthetic materials, too, emerge not from curiosity but necessity. As the war cuts off global supplies, chemists are ordered to create replacements: rubber for tires, nylon for parachutes, polymers for insulation. Step into a wartime chemistry lab, and you'll see scientists working amid glass beakers and swirling vapors, their white coats stained with dyes and solvents. They're not trying to invent the future of fashion or create lighter, stronger consumer goods. They're simply trying to keep armies moving, aircraft flying, and equipment functional. Yet the materials they produce, nylon threads stretched to impossible lengths, synthetic rubber that bounces back after relentless strain, plastics molded into durable shapes, will eventually reshape civilian life. They become stockings, toothbrushes, ropes, gears, toys, medical devices, and thousands of everyday objects. The modern world, with all its smooth surfaces and flexible components, takes root in these hurried wartime experiments. On the front lines, soldiers carry gear that tells its own story of innovation. Lightweight, synthetic fabrics line their uniforms. Plastic-coated wires connect their radios. Rubberized materials keep their equipment sealed from rain and mud. None of these inventions were originally made with comfort or convenience in mind, and yet after the war, industries will seize them, refine them, and bring them into the homes of millions. Picture a young couple in 1950 standing in front of a gleaming new kitchen display, marveling at a plastic-handled utensil, a nylon whisk, a microwave oven humming quietly on the countertop. These objects feel miraculous, almost futuristic, but their lineage stretches back to the smoke and grit of wartime workshops, to scientists scribbling formulas in notebooks stained with coffee and fatigue, to engineers disassembling machines at dawn just to reassemble them by dusk. Civilian life after the war explodes with conveniences that seem magical only because their origins were hidden behind classified doors. The hum of microwave energy, the glide of a jet engine, the stretch of synthetic fibers, all feel like gifts from a future that arrived too early. But they were not gifts. They were built under pressure, forged by fear, driven by necessity. And their transformation from military tool to household staple is one of the most unexpected legacies of the conflict. So the next time a microwave chimes softly behind you, or the cabin lights dim on a long flight as engines settle into their high-altitude rhythm, or your jacket stretches comfortably when you reach for something, remember this. These small comforts were born in a world fighting to survive. They carry the fingerprints of a generation that had no choice but to innovate, and in doing so, shape the everyday rhythms of your life. Dawn breaks over a field hospital on the outskirts of a European battleground. The first light, revealing canvas tents sagging under the weight of dew and smoke drifting from distant artillery. Inside the largest tent, the air is thick with antiseptic, sweat, and urgency. Nurses move with relentless precision between rows of wounded soldiers, their boots sliding across mud-covered floors, their voices steady despite the chaos humming just outside. Here, at the edge of destruction, something quietly revolutionary is unfolding. Not in the roar of machines, but in the desperate struggle to keep a pulse beating. A doctor bends over a young soldier whose breathing is shallow and uneven. His uniform is torn, stained with dirt and blood that won't stop flowing. Only a few decades earlier, this injury would have been a death sentence. But now the doctor reaches for a vial of something new, a substance that glows amber in the lamplight. Penicillin. It's still warm from the hurried distillation done only hours before, part of a batch produced under conditions no laboratory would ever consider ideal. Yet the doctor knows what this drug can do. He injects it quickly, knowing that within hours the infection clawing its way through the soldier's bloodstream will be stopped cold. The miracle isn't just the drug itself. It's the speed and scale at which it's being produced. Not long ago, penicillin was difficult to cultivate, a fragile mold growing reluctantly in shallow trays. But wartime necessity transforms everything. Scientists work in shifts around the clock, experimenting with new methods to coax more of the precious antibiotic from every culture. Fermenters are redesigned. Processes are streamlined. Entire factories are repurposed into biological assembly lines. Penicillin becomes not a laboratory curiosity, but a weapon, one that will save tens of thousands before the war ends and millions after. Just beyond the medical tent, a different kind of innovation unfolds. Crates stacked with glass bottles clink softly as they are unloaded from trucks, each bottle filled with carefully typed, refrigerated blood. A decade earlier, the idea of transporting blood across continents would have been unthinkably dangerous. Blood spoiled quickly. It clotted. It degraded. But the war forces scientists to confront these problems, and in doing so, they revolutionized the science of transfusion. Preservation techniques improve. Refrigeration becomes standardized. Blood banks, once small, local operations, evolve into vast networks capable of sending life-saving blood to front lines anywhere in the world. Step into one of those wartime laboratories, where the bright white light reflects off stainless steel and the hum of refrigeration units offers a steady backdrop to quiet, meticulous work. Technicians label vials with practiced precision. They test samples for compatibility. They pack crates with insulation and ice, ensuring they can survive journeys across oceans and battlefields. The systems built here, classification, storage, transport, will outlive the war by decades, forming the backbone of modern emergency medicine. Meanwhile, deep inside an Allied operations center, mathematicians sit at long wooden tables littered with maps, slide rules, and stacks of data. They are not commanders, but their influence shapes everything from supply routes to bombing strategies. This is the birth of operational research, a discipline forged from the need to make every decision count. The questions they tackle are brutally practical. How many supply trucks can move through a muddy road before it becomes impassable? What formation minimizes the loss of aircraft? How many medics are needed at the front to keep casualty numbers survivable? To answer these questions, they create methods that will one day become foundational in industries far removed from war. They track variables, build models, test outcomes, and optimize processes with scientific rigor. Their work reduces waste, increases efficiency, and saves lives. After the war, these methods will slip seamlessly into civilian sectors, business, healthcare, transportation, reshaping entire fields with a discipline born in desperation. Back on the battlefield, medics carry lightweight kits filled with tools that didn't exist a few years earlier. Synthetic tourniquets, stable sulfa drugs, new forms of wound dressings. They kneel beside fallen soldiers under fire, their hands steady, their voices calm. These innovations don't merely stop bleeding, they buy time. Time until the stretcher arrives. Time until the ambulance rattles toward the field hospital. Time until the blood bank's supply reaches the surgeon's hands. And in medical schools far from the front, young physicians study techniques developed under fire. New surgical strategies, new understanding of shock, new ways to manage trauma. War pushes doctors into harsh, unforgiving classrooms where the lessons come at a terrible cost. But the knowledge gained becomes the foundation of modern emergency medicine. As you walk through the field hospital again, now in the golden light of evening, the connection becomes clear. The quiet beep of a heart monitor in today's hospital, the sterile hum of a blood refrigerator, the swift sting of an antibiotic injection. These are echoes of this moment, of these tents, of these frantic, exhausted medical workers fighting to preserve life in a world tearing itself apart. The war sought only to destroy, but in resisting that destruction, humanity uncovered new ways to heal. Night has fallen over the desert, but the sky above is alive with motion. A rocket stands poised on its launch platform, its metal skin shimmering under floodlights, steam venting in soft white ghosts from its cooling lines. Engineers in headsets circle it like priests around an altar, checking cables, adjusting valves, watching gauges that tremble ever so slightly with the turbulence inside the fuel tanks. Far above them, stars will slowly through the sky, ancient, silent, indifferent witnesses to a moment shaped not by peace, but by the frantic ingenuity of a world once at war. As the countdown ticks forward, a distant echo lingers somewhere behind the thunder about to erupt. It is the echo of a German engineer in 1944, staring at the V-2 rocket as it arcs into the night, its tail flame a sharp and terrifying spear of light. That weapon, a machine built for destruction, was the first human-made object to breach the edge of space. No one watching it then could have imagined the future unfolding now. Satellites circling the Earth, guiding ships and planes, mapping continents from orbit, quietly beaming invisible signals into the palms of billions. But that future began here, with wartime desperation, with engineers racing against collapse, with technology evolving in the shadows of conflict. The rocket on the launch pad shudders. Fuel pumps whine. Engines cough and bloom into roaring life. When it lifts from the ground, the earth trembles and dust ripples away in waves. Fires lick the pad, and as it claws upward through the night, it carries with it not just instruments, not just ambitions, but the entire legacy of wartime innovation that made this moment possible. The satellites it will deploy will join others in a carefully choreographed dance. A constellation silently calculating the longitude and latitude of anyone who asks. The phone in your pocket can speak to them across thousands of miles. It can locate you, route you, bring you home. This modern miracle feels effortless, but every signal passing between you and the heavens is built on the foundation of wartime rocketry and the navigation systems that evolved from it. In a dimly lit control center thousands of miles away, a different kind of innovation pulses through the cables and circuit boards. Rows of servers blink in steady patterns, cooling fans whispering in a chorus, data flowing in invisible currents. The architecture behind this network, redundant pathways, distributed connections, systems designed to survive catastrophic failures, carries the DNA of wartime communication strategies. In an era when a single bomb could sever communication lines, engineers were forced to imagine networks that couldn't be destroyed by one blow. That mindset, born from fear and necessity, will one day inspire the decentralized structure of the internet. What was once meant to preserve military coordination through chaos will become the backbone of global society, linking businesses, families, cultures, and entire economies. But you don't need to stand in a server room or beneath a rocket to feel the presence of these wartime echoes. You feel them when your flight climbs gracefully above the clouds, riding on engines whose ancestors first screamed across European skies. You feel them when your microwave hums to life, awakening a technology once intended to detect enemies in the dark. You feel them when your car's sensors interpret the environment with radar-descended precision, when synthetic materials in your clothes stretch and breathe, when antibiotics wait patiently in your medicine cabinet. Now picture a bustling modern city, the glass skyscrapers catching sunrise, trains slicing through tunnels with laser accuracy, aircraft drawing silver lines overhead. The invisible threads holding this world together originate from laboratories where scientists once worked under blackout curtains, from factories pounding out inventions at breakneck pace, from maps, charts, and operational models created by mathematicians who had no luxury of error. Every convenience around you carries a faint imprint of urgency, of fear, of the determination to solve problems too large to ignore. Walk through a contemporary hospital. The soft beeping of monitors, the sterile displays of imaging devices, the transfusion bags hanging beside a patient's bed. Each one whispers its lineage to the blood banks and medical breakthrough efforts born in battlefield tents. Wander through an airport terminal. Jet engines spool up with a rising whine, their origins entwined with a race for aerial superiority. Sit on a city bus made of lightweight composites, glance at street signs manufactured for polymers, turn on a radio that receives signals with clarity unimaginable before the war. All of it, directly or indirectly, shaped by a conflict that remade the world not just politically, but technologically. The irony, sharp and undeniable, is that the darkest years of human history became the forge in which modern life was shaped. The innovations created under duress did not die with the war. They evolved, matured, and slipped quietly into the architecture of everyday existence. You carry pieces of that era with you, in your devices, your transportation, your medicine, even the very ways you navigate and communicate. In the quiet moments between rocket launches and server pings, between microwaves humming and aircraft ascending, a truth emerges. Humanity is defined not only by the destruction it can unleash, but by the inventions it creates in the fight to survive. And though the war ended long ago, its technological heartbeat still pulses through the world around you. A reminder that even in humanity's darkest hours, innovation flickers, grows, and sometimes lights a path for generations yet to come.